Hello, I'm Scott Stephenson. I'm President and CEO of the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, and welcome to another episode of AmRev360. This is a conversation about the American Revolution from all angles, and we explore all kinds of different subjects relating to the museum world, to history, to the past, the present, the future, current events, all with a connection back to the American Revolution. So this week, I'm really excited to be discussing a new initiative at the Museum of the American Revolution, our Citizenship initiative that's just got kicked off. Of course, this is an election year, and there is no more sacred moment in the American Republic than the election day that happens when we come together and set up the peaceful transition of power, one of the great gifts of our founders to all of us as inheritors of the American Revolution. So I'm joined today by Dana Devon, who's the project director and really the creator of our Citizenship initiative, and one of our most esteemed graduates of the Citizenship initiative, Juan Giarrizzo. And welcome, Juan. Welcome, Dana. How are you today?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to dive in a little bit later to some of the details about, what's unique about the Citizenship initiative at the Museum of the American Revolutions, or how the class is structured in just a minute here. But I also want to give Juan a chance to share with us his background, sort of take us on your journey, Juan, from where you were born, what brought you to the United States, your path to having this desire to become a citizen.
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. For me, the Museum of American Revolution has a very special place in my heart. So I was born in Caracas, Venezuela. I left my country over 10 years ago, escaping what became a criminal regime, as many other Venezuelans has done around the world. And my journey as a citizen starts with very much in alignment with what Dana just said. I think that the concept of citizen is a person that is willing to participate in driving the changes of the country that they live in. And I think when we look at the history of America as a concept, as an idea, we can see how the concept of a citizen has evolved through history, and how many people has fought for rights to have a place in the table, as Dana just mentioned at the beginning. So I think I was in the first course of citizenship in the museum, which made it all more magic. And I was very excited to become a citizen, to be able to participate in the changes and processes of the United States.
Yeah, and what is your day job, Juan?
My day job, I'm an informatics project manager at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Fantastic, right? So just right across the schuylkill from us here.
That's correct.
Yeah, well, I think this initiative of the museums and the impulse that you share with us, Juan, just fits so nicely in with the museum's core mission. I mean, we're all about a conception of the American Revolution that does not look at the revolution as just ancient history, a war of independence, something that took place long ago with powdered wig wearing men in short pants looking at a piece of paper in a building down the street, all of which is, of course, very important as well. But that we view the American Revolution as an ongoing experiment in self-government, something that was set in motion in the 18th century, but absolutely is, this experiment is uncertain about how it will end. Hopefully it will never end. It will continue forever. And so that's, I think, been one of the powerful things that we found in engaging with our visitors here at the museum is people will often come thinking, oh, I'm going to learn about, George Washington crossing the Delaware and et cetera, Yorktown, there's the end of the war, maybe I'll learn about the Constitution, and then the story is over. But we always kind of surprise them, I think, at the end. We have a short film called The Ongoing Revolution that takes you through the generations that took up the mantle of the founders and those freedoms and liberties that are expressed in our founding documents, and continue to fight to make sure that all people are treated equally under the law. And as you know, one of the most powerful experiences, I think, for many people is right at the end of the galleries when you look at yourself in mirrors that we've positioned on that final wall, and we just say, meet the future of the American Revolution. So it was, I think, really exciting when just a year into operating the museum, we met Dana and started talking about the idea of reinforcing this strong commitment in our message to the American Revolution as this ongoing experiment, and this recognition that the founders did not create a nation that was defined by membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, or believing the same thing, or speaking the same language. America really is an idea, and it is it's something you can become, which is very unique in the world. And what could we do as an institution to try to help strengthen that impulse and that tradition in America? And so, Dana, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of the structure of the class, and what I think is a little unique of actually using the museum and our core exhibition as the classroom for much of the teaching.
Yeah, I mean, just as a matter of strict pedagogy, think about how sustaining that learning environment is. When you're learning about U.S. history and the framing of a government in a series of galleries that's rich with objects and stories and immersive environments, this stuff sticks with them. It's a powerful way to teach U.S. history. So just to step back, a legal permanent resident, or also known as a green card holder, if he or she desires, they can apply for citizenship, and that process is pretty cumbersome. Juan has just lived through it, so he can speak more eloquently than I. But in a snapshot, you need an N400 application, a bear of a form. You need biometrics, essentially your fingerprints. Then you're invited to an interview. That interview comprises two components. The first assesses English proficiency, reading, writing, speaking. And the second assesses what USCIS, United States Citizen and Immigration Services Administration, characterizes as civics. And essentially, it requires you to memorize the answers to 100 questions that kind of tickle both American government and US history. What we have an opportunity to do in the Citizen Initiative, which is essentially, we offer a free course. It sustains itself over 4 weeks to Philadelphia's growing immigrant and refugee population. And we have an opportunity with these group of students to use the contents of the gallery to actually stitch together both a more coherent and a more nuanced narrative around US history and American government. And throughout the course, we continue to map back to those aspirational ideals of equality and liberty, first espoused in the Declaration of Independence, later codified in the US Constitution. So we have an opportunity to continue to revisit that, those foundational values. And as you said, Scott, at the very end, the very last thing you see is an image of yourself. You are reflected. You are the future revolutionary. You have both the opportunity, but also the obligation to continue to forge and push ahead with this great experiment in self-governance. And that's something we also get to hone in the course, but students themselves feel. And the last thing I'll just say about the Citizen Initiative and what makes teaching US history and government in a museum so unique, particularly this museum, only because of this museum, is that as an individual wends its way through the galleries, they get to understand that there isn't just one narrative about the founding. There isn't one narrative about democracy, one uncontested narrative. And people who are born in every other part of the world go through there, and they have an opportunity to see people other than white European males sit at the center of the story. And that's exciting for them. When you get to experience the American Revolutionary era and the founding of the nation through the eyes of African Americans, both free and enslaved, through a broad swath of indigenous populations, through the eyes of women, you get to feel at least the potential to be part of the club. And I think that's what engenders what I found to be this great affection that our students have for the Museum of the American Revolution. They're part of the club now. They will exercise any opportunity they can to come to the museum, to bring their family, to bring their friends. They want a piece of this because I think we give them the opportunity to see themselves as part of this great narrative right from the beginning, right from the first gallery.
Juan, I'd love for you to reflect on kind of from the students' perspective. What was it like? Tell us a little bit about your fellow students, and what was student culture like at the University of the Museum of the American.
It's amazing. I was lucky enough to find there were other two Venezuelans in the course, so we had our little group of Venezuelans, and just to reflect on what Dana just said, I think what is interesting from the perspective of a person taking the citizenship class at the museum is from the first gallery, when you realize after the end of was it the French-Indian War? When
Yes.
you realize that in the territory of the United States, well, what was going to be the United States, who was already there? It was a conglomerate of people, right? Europeans, Africans. You have all these people that was one way or another brought or found themselves into this territory. So that's the first striking point, that the concept of being an American, it's a construct around who created this idea of a country. And you can say, well, everybody has the same right of calling themselves an American because they were already there and they were already represented one way or another, and they were participating in this process. Mm-hmm. I think for me as a student was amazing because every gallery was a reinforcement of what we were discussing in the classroom. And the artifacts and the way that the museum is curated, which I have to say is very well done. It's what you call in media a delivery magic. You really know how to deliver the message. And when you end the tour and your experience with the Washington tent, which is something that it doesn't matter how many times I go to the museum, it always brings tears to my eyes.
Me too.
Because it's a powerful example of what it is to be a truly statistician, right? Relinquish power, and given an opportunity to an idea to evolve. So as a student, was always a path of amazement and learning and passion for what being a revolutionary was back then and now.
Now, I know this has not only resulted in you becoming a U.S. citizen, but you're kind of on an interesting path with a new goal in mind. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you've done, both what I would call community organizing, as well as an aspiration that will require you to be a few years older, but it's coming fast.
So I remember when we were going through this process, the question was posed, why do you want to be a citizen? And I mean, a lot of people want to be able to vote, and voting is such an important and critical right to not to have, but just exercise, because that's how you make changes in a peaceful and democratic way. And my answer had a little bit of an extended point, which is I want to become a US Senator. I want to run for office. And in order to do that, I think that the service to the community is where all of that begins. An honest service to your community and an honest intention to be of service. So in that, I have been involved with community service with the Venezuelans in Philadelphia. I recently helped to organize a new group called Gente de Venezuela, which translates as People of Venezuela, when we're trying to empower our immigrant community through professional development, advocacy, and culture. And we're very much focused right now on trying to empower the Latino vote, trying to enfranchise our Latino voters. So Latinos this year are making the biggest minority that are going to participate in these general elections, with a whopping number of 32 million eligible voters, according to the Pew Institute. So for us, it's very important to let our community know you have a place in this table, these are your rights, and this is how you exercise them. And it's a never-ending mission.
The most American of stories.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, as both of you know, I find one of the most inspiring reflections on the meaning of the American Revolution from a later generation came from Abraham Lincoln in his famous electric cord speech of July 1858, and it's a piece we riff on a little bit in our closing film in the museum, The Ongoing Revolution. And it's during the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and it's just a week or 10 days after the 4th of July. And Lincoln, the question comes up in these sort of debates back and forth, this public dialogue about kind of the meaning of the 4th of July. And in a moment in which the United States was going through another period of rapid immigration, that the ethnic makeup of the nation was changing very quickly. And Lincoln takes up this question, and he first reflects masterful rhetoric, takes up and reminds his audience that, well, we've all just come away from our 4th of July picnics, and talks about what those mean to Americans, that they come together and it makes them feel connected with one another, and it connects them with their forefathers who were part of fighting for and winning American independence. But then crucially, he does this turn where he says, but that only comprehends half of the nation. Now, at this point, the population was about 38 million. And he basically says, half of the population are composed of people who are either immigrants themselves or the children of those who've come since the American Revolution. And they look back at 1776 and don't have a personal connection to it. And of course, he's reflecting this kind of existential fear on the part of some people in the Republic at the time. Well, would the Republic be able to survive with all of these, German Catholics and Scandinavians coming to America? And his answer, of course, was an emphatic yes, that looking back at the Declaration of Independence and seeing those words, all men are created equal, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and feeling that that is the animating creed that has brought them to this shore, they become, and these are Lincoln's words, like their flesh of the flesh and blood of the blood of the men who wrote those words in 1776. And I always, when we do our naturalization ceremonies here at the museum, and when I have an opportunity to address those new citizens, I always try to, much less eloquently than Abraham Lincoln, recount that story, because of course, my family is just many generations of people coming from many parts of the world to these shores, and it's the most American of experiences to create new citizens. And I think what I'm so excited and proud about as president of the museum is that our institution, really holds this very dear and close to our hearts as the core of what we're about. I'm much less interested in, a student coming out of the museum doing better on the AP history exam than I am having them kind of feel that emotional connection. And as you talk about, Juan, and Dana, it happens most often in that tent theater. And I have met World War II veterans and fifth graders come out of that Washington's war tent experience with tears streaming down their eyes. And if there's one thing that I hope we can do for the nation in this time in which we are so divided, and they're very troubling times that we're living in, is if a place like a museum can help to restore the center and ground people in what we share as Americans, even as we have very different perspectives sometimes, policy differences, etc. But those revolutionaries marched to war with flags that had the chain of states and "We are one" in the center, and it's something to, I think, constantly remind ourselves of. So, Dana, any thoughts on, or just anything you can share about those who might be watching, who they themselves might be interested, or know of someone who might be interested in participating? How can people find out more about the citizenship?
Yeah, sure.
What's involved in signing up?
Very easy. We do
particularly in this COVID time that we are.
Yeah, we do it online at the Museum of the American Revolution. Go key up Citizen Initiative, and there'll be a online registration form. However, we are transitioning to an online format this time around. It begins Monday. We are at full registration for that class, but we'll be running another online class shortly thereafter. And we already have, I think, as of yesterday, invited people to begin registering for the next class, and we'll get back to them as soon as we open up the dates for that. I wanted to say that the first 7 of our classes are dedicated to substance, U.S. history, and American government. The last class, we convene a panel of experts who, first we have a representative from USCIS, and that representative lays out the nuts and bolts of applying for citizenship. And then we have 2 or 3 immigration attorneys that give you a much more candid counsel as to how to apply, when you need counsel, when you don't need counsel. And then we culminate in at least 1, if not 2, mock interviews. Here's what it's going to feel like. Here's the questions that are going to come at you. Here's what that interview is going to be for the. So we do that as well in that last class. But yeah, we are very much looking forward to going back to holding the classes in the museum and spending hours in the gallery and having our CEO give us a guided tour. But until then, we're going to try and do this online. We have wonderful people that will also serve as educators and interpreters that will be part of this online class as well. So the students will get a peek at the galleries through our virtual tours.
And I should say a shout out here to the funders that make this possible. Will and Valerie Schwartz, board members at the Museum of the American Revolution. Will himself, a naturalized American citizen. John Walsh and UGI Corporation, again, made it for us to make this completely free
Yes, very generous, very generous. Yeah.
Juan, I'm counting on you to announce your run from Senate for the Senate at the Museum of the American Revolution.
I hope we come to that. I think my dream is that anybody that becomes a citizen at some point runs for something. I mean, I like to dream the Senate, but I think any local office will be a great place to be of service. And even if you run and you don't win, running for something starts conversations that are critical, especially nowadays. So don't stop at voting. If you feel that you can be useful and you know your way around your community, please run for something. There's plenty of levels of positions and offices that you can be of help.
Yeah.
These are the building blocks of a democratic republic, obviously. Well, I think we've gone right up to our allotted time beautifully, as if we planned this conversation and it wasn't just organic as it was. So I'm sorry that we're not all able to be sitting in the same place, but this is a great alternative. And I wish Juan, you all the luck in your endeavors, and I know we'll see you back at the museum here soon. We're actually open and welcoming visitors. In fact, just as maybe a closing anecdote, I literally walked upstairs to tape this, having just had an incredible conversation with a visitor, an American citizen, but who has lived in Nicaragua for most of her adult life, and she was about halfway through the galleries, and just struck up a conversation, and she started sharing that Nicaragua, of course, is having many political challenges, and that people are reflecting on models of government. And she said, this is all so relevant and so inspiring to see how Americans did not all start this process agreeing on what they were doing, or that they were, that there wasn't a single consensus vision of even what the American Revolution meant. And we were somehow able to bridge our differences to come up with a system that would allow us to resolve often sharp differences with ballots rather than bullets. And it has been a great gift that continues to give to present generations here and around the world. So thank you all for tuning in today. Thank you, Dana Devon. Thank you, Juan Giarrizzo. And come see us at the Museum of the American Revolution soon.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, see you soon.